Welcome everyone to the webinar series. This is George Ozoude of Time Health Capital. I will be hosting tonight's event as Bio Fasanya with Dr. Breathe Easy Capital is in Tampa doing due diligence on an exciting investment opportunity down there. So he'll be back this week or next week. And so I am hosting, and we are actually going to be talking about a very cool topic. I'm actually substituting for Bronson Hill, who had to make a prior family engagement that came up. And so Bronson Hill is going to be presenting next month. So I am substituting for him and, hosting solo here, just as Bio is out. So, but I think the topic is a cool topic that I think will be of interest to not just physicians, even though that's kind of what I focus on, but it is also, I think, applicable to all busy professionals, folks who are in W-2s, who are, working, hustling hard and trying to get financial freedom. I myself have had this interest for many years now, and I started investing in real estate opportunities as a limited partner. And I didn't really know what options were out there, not only as a limited partner, but also as a general partner. I kind of felt like I went to medical school to become a doctor and a surgeon. So anyone else who has a profession, a vocation, probably did the same thing. So I figured folks who ran these big fancy real estate projects, went to school and went to training and did X, Y, and Z and got this degree and that certification. And that's how they earn the right to do what they do. But as I got familiar with the ecosystem, I started learning that there's actually more physicians than I thought who are in not only the LP space, but they're also in the GP space. So tonight, this evening, I wanted to just touch upon different ways physicians and busy professionals can pursue GP opportunities, general partner. And that's for anyone who may not know the terminology. The general partner is the core team who runs the business plan of a real asset investment, whether it's a large apartment acquisition or if it's a ground up development. That general partner team is that core team. Usually it can be anywhere from 3 to 5, sometimes even 10 different general partners. Ideally, you want it small because these are decision makers and you don't want too many cooks in the kitchen. And on the other side of that coin, you have limited partners who invest their capital into these deals. Not every real estate deal has to have limited partners. You can just have a joint venture with general partners contributing their own capital to a deal. And you may not necessarily have to have limited partners. But once you get big enough in scale, some of these deals require additional capital, and that's where limited partners come in. So I just wanted to start off with that preface just to make sure everybody has that frame of reference. You have a general partnership side, and then you have limited partnership side. And on the limited partnership side, you can invest just by researching a deal, a market, an opportunity, a group of investors. And then at that point, if you feel comfortable enough, you can wire up your funds over to the general partnership. And at that point, it truly becomes passive. And you're now collecting passive income. You're growing your passive income streams. But I want to focus a little bit more on the general partnership side because that's what I think is a little less obvious or less known to people. It's something that I had to learn as I invested as an LP. The first thing I wanted to kind of touch upon is the concept of leverage. Specifically, I wanted to talk about different ways anyone can leverage something. And that's the concept of how you get on a GP side is what can you bring to the table of the general partnership? What can you leverage? What things that you possess that you can leverage to be desirable in a general partnership? Um, Things that, we probably are aware of, we can all leverage our time in one fashion or another. And this applies to our regular jobs as physicians and busy professionals. We leverage our time, we punch a clock, or we, spend many hours in training or, service. We can also leverage our capital. We can put funds just like an LP can use their capital and liquidity to help fund a deal. Um, Folks can leverage their knowledge. We see that all the time in consultants, folks who just literally have a framework of how things work in an industry or a sector, and therefore they are sought after to give their knowledge in return for some kind of compensation. You can also leverage your network. So if you have a large group of followers, so we think about the whole Instagram influencer culture, this is another way to leverage something about yourself. You can leverage your network, your community. You can leverage your skills, and that kind of goes a little bit hand in hand with knowledge. If you have more technical, physical skills that you can actually do things with your hands, or just kind of do things in general, you can leverage that. So we think about plumbers, craftsmen, surgeons. We're leveraging our physical skills to do something and complete tasks. You can leverage what we call sweat equity, and this is, if you're have a job that requires something with heavy labor, so construction worker. I even like to say some of these influencers, these fitness influencers, they're leveraging their ability to lift heavy weights while recording, and they get compensation. They can turn that into compensation. So just this overall idea of leverage, and that's going to kind of set the framework of how you can market yourself to a GP team, a collection of operators. Maybe there's something within those leverage lists that you can offer. And that's not a comprehensive list. That's just some things that I think of that come to my mind. I'm sure there's other things, like reputation might be another thing that you can leverage if you have a great reputation in a certain community or in a certain industry. So it's definitely not an exhaustive list, but well, let's use those concepts of leverage to kind of go into the next section when we describe what the GP responsibilities are. So what do GPs do? And I listed out several things that, I feel is a pretty comprehensive list. It also may not be complete, but GPs are involved in many aspects of the deal. They can be involved in deal sourcing. So that means finding the opportunities. They can be involved in underwriting, meaning they assess the financial viability of a potential project. And that involves spreadsheets and calculations and equations and formulas. They can be involved in the due diligence process, which means vetting either the market, the city, the submarket, the property itself, walking around the areas, the neighborhoods, assessing whether it's a viable opportunity, whether the macroeconomics make sense. And that's part of what a GP can do as well. They can be involved in setting up a lot of the paperwork, the administrative work, and that's legal, the assets, the entities, the accounting systems, the lending systems, and the lending paperwork. So they can be involved in that process. And that often involves a upfront capital investment. And we call some of that the earnest money. So they may be involved on that side of the thing, of the GP responsibility. Next, they can be involved in the overall asset management. And that not only includes some of those other things that I mentioned, kind of sourcing those, whether it's you taking on those responsibilities or you're outsourcing and delegating that to an underwriting company or a due diligence company or a broker to find a property. But in addition to that, you're overseeing, as an asset manager, you're overseeing a CapEx budget or a rehab budget. You're overseeing the property managers. You may actually be the property manager. If not, you're going to have to find a property manager and manage the property manager, right? You can't kind of leave them to their own. You can't leave them to their own, because that may not work out well if they're just kind of running the ship. You have to actually oversee their property management functioning. If it's a ground up development, you may be overseeing the construction budget and the contractors and getting folks kind of on time and in budget, within budget. Lastly, a couple of things. You can be something called a loan guarantor. And another name for that people may have heard is called a key principal. And this is somebody, I like to make the analogy, this is somebody like a parent who's co-signing on a student loan. This is someone who brings their credibility, their credit, their net worth, and their liquidity to the deal in order to obtain the funding from the lenders. And then lastly, you can be an investor relations and capital raiser, meaning in this circumstance where a project requires additional funding outside of just the general partnership, i.e. limited partners, you may have to have someone who's designated to engage the investors, raise capital, educate, and bring them the funding from those investors. There are certain industry standards as far as who gets what kind of equity split for those responsibilities. Each one of those things I just mentioned may be its own task with its own personnel, but oftentimes you'll find a general partnership with 3 to 5 people who split up those tasks in some way. So how do you designate and delineate who gets how much of that general partnership equity? Well, there's some industry standards. It's not a hard and fast rule, but usually when we go down that same list, you can kind of keep these numbers in mind. Someone who's a deal finder, who sources the deal, usually gets about 10% if they're a part of the GP. Someone who does the underwriting gets about 10%. And you can start to add these up. Someone who does the due diligence process, walks the property, flies to the city to look at the market, they get about 10%. Someone who puts a lot of the earnest money, upfront money down to set up the legal structure and the accounting and the lending, they're gonna get 15%. The asset manager or the lead sponsor who's putting everything together and kind of coordinating all these moving parts, they're also gonna get 15%. The loan guarantor, the key principal, someone who's backing the loan, they're gonna get 10%. And then lastly, like the capital raisers and the investor relations personnel, they're responsible for a huge part of the syndication, which is bringing in capital. So they get 30%. You add all those up, you get 100% of the GP equity. This is not the LP equity that we mentioned before. And typical syndications have a GP and LP equity split. So let's say a deal, and this is just a rough example, has 100 shares to be distributed. Those 100 shares will get split up between the GP and the LP, 30% and 70%. We see that split a lot, the 70-30 LP-GP split. So 70% of the shares go to the LPs, 30% goes to the GPs. So what I just described was how the GPs break out their 30% split, if that makes sense. And so now you're thinking about those different tasks, those different responsibilities. You can go back to your leverage list and see what things you would have to bring to the table in order to be a deal finder. So that kind of responsibility, you're going to need to be able to leverage, you're going to need to have and be able to leverage things like your time, because it takes a lot of time to find deals. Not just any deal, you got to find good deals, right? You're going to need to develop a network because you need to get funnels of deals. People need to be calling you for deals, not just you going out and knocking on doors trying to find deals. And that takes time too. So if you have a good network of people who are in constant flow of deals, deal sourcer or deal finder might be a good thing for you to be as a GP. You also need to have knowledge about deals and knowledge about markets and to be able to identify a good deal in a good market. So You need to be able to have those things in your back pocket as your leverage tool. For underwriters, you need to leverage your time because it takes a lot of time to underwrite, especially in the beginning, because you use a lot of spreadsheets and you have to build out the formulas and the systems. And then to be a good underwriter, you have to do it a lot. You have to practice and do it a lot. And so you just need to be able to allocate a lot of time towards that. You need to have knowledge of how to even create those spreadsheets and how to make sure you're running the numbers correctly, and getting good input and output. But other than that, you don't necessarily need a lot of networking. You can do that by yourself. You can do that in extra, hours in the week that you devote towards that outside of your W-2. You don't need a lot of capital. It's not very capital intensive. You just need a computer, an internet connection, and spreadsheet. And if somebody trusts you to underwrite deals for them, then you can be part of the underwriting team and contribute that to the GP team. Due diligence, you're going to need time for that. Like I said, you may be flying or driving to a site, a city, a submarket. You may be walking a property. And from what I understand, when you walk a property, you walk every unit. So we're talking from 20 units to 200 units. You got to walk every property and look for any signs that may suggest that the deal has more expenses that can be under the hood, right? You got to look under the hood and look at every property, look at every external common area, the roof, the plumbing. This takes time. You definitely need knowledge for that. You need to be aware of what you're looking at, what you're looking for to pick out the trouble spots. You also need some skill for that. I think that kind of goes hand in hand with the knowledge. But you don't necessarily need a lot of capital or a lot of network. You may develop a little due diligence team, but you don't necessarily need a broad network or huge net worth in order to be someone who contributes to the due diligence portion. Setting up the legal, the CPAs, the accountants, the financial analysis structures and systems, interacting with the lenders, securing the loan. You're definitely going to need a very big network for this. You're going to need to leverage your ability to make relationships with those vendors. Unless you have those skills personally, unless you're a lawyer, unless you're an accountant or CFO or a banker, you're going to have to outsource those things. So your network becomes huge in pulling that together. You're going to need knowledge. You're going to have to speak their language in order to have credibility. So you need knowledge and you're going to need capital because those things are some of the upfront costs that go into making a syndication. So before a penny gets made on the project, these things need to be put in place. So that's something to keep in mind. As far as asset management, you kind of need everything, right? You need time. You need networks because you're putting all the pieces together. You need knowledge. You need to understand how to manage people and manage a business. You need skills. That's a people skill person to get people to row a boat in one direction. You need those skills, those people skills to be able to do that. For a loan guarantor, you're going to need capital. This is the main thing. You're bringing your balance sheet to the collection of general partners in order to help them obtain a loan. And not only that, you also have to leverage your reputation. And I'll dive into this a little bit because this is one of the key ways I think busy professionals can get in on the GP side, especially if you're a high earner and you've developed a higher net worth. You can add your balance sheet, your net worth, in with the other GP's net worth, and it actually gets looked at as a collective net worth by the lenders. The lenders will look at that and they want that collective net worth to be equal, at least equal to the size of the loan that you're pursuing. The other thing that lenders will look at is the liquidity. They want to know that how much cash the collective GP team has on hand. And so they want that number to be about 10% of the loan that you're pursuing. So, and what we mean by cash on hand is cash in a bank account and cash that is in equity stocks. So they look at those two things when determining if you have enough liquidity to feel safe enough to give you the loan. The last thing that they look at, those first two things get you in the door with the lender, but the last thing that they also look at is your reputation. Meaning, let me give an example. If you have a high net worth and you have high liquidity, you check those boxes, but your reputation doesn't really give the lender confidence that you can take down a 300 unit hotel like you've done, I don't know, venture capital for the last 10 years. And now all of a sudden you want to do a big deal on a 300 unit hotel. They're going to look at your track record and say, well, you've done venture capital. Yes, you have done well there. You've had a high net worth and good liquidity, but we don't know your track record in hotel business. And so they may look at that and kind of use that as a decision maker to allow you to be a loan guarantor or a key principal. So I would say both capital and reputation is what you can leverage if you have that, and if you want to become a loan guarantor or key principal on a GP team. Lastly is capital raiser and investor relations. And this one is also another one I think a lot of busy professionals can find their way onto a GP team by being a capital raiser and investor relations. Of note, you can't just be a capital raiser. No one on the GP team can only capital raise, meaning you have to do something else that we just mentioned. You have to at least do something else. If you're just a capital raiser, the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, if they investigate that and find that out, that is a very big legal problem that you have on your hands. You can face jail time, you can face fines. So as folks kind of get out there and explore these opportunities, remember that you can't only just raise capital. Make sure you're doing.
Why is that, George?
Great question. So it's a protection mechanism. They don't want folks to just raise capital for any deal, get their compensation, and then run away and not have any skin in the game. Because then that would set up for a lot of fraudulent environment. And fraud still happens, but this is one of the ways SEC tries to deter fraudulent events, because you may have just some, folks out there trying to take advantage. They develop a network. They get everybody real excited about a deal. They invest a whole ton of money. They get compensated right at that moment for all that capital that they raised, but they're not actually invested in the deal. They are ghost after that, and they are long gone with the percentage of their compensation. The deal is actually a bad deal. They were able to sell it, get their compensation, and leave, and all these investors now are in this bad deal that's going to lose money. So I don't know whether it's true or not. This is like could be a debate, but the SEC's intent is supposedly to deter that kind of behavior. So they want to see all the capital raisers, all the GPs invested in the deal, if that makes sense. Any follow-up to that? So what would a capital raiser or investor relations person leverage? By the way, investor relations is a great way for a capital raiser to do something other than just raise capital, because not only are you getting funds in the door, you're also communicating to the investors. You're answering their questions. You're educating them. You're keeping them updated on the course of the whole project along its timeline. You're constantly involved. You're not just on a beach somewhere spending your compensation, right? That's a great way to prove that you're not just a capital raiser, is actually being an investor relations personnel on the GP team. What can you leverage? You can leverage many things. You can leverage your network, because if you're a high earner, a high income earner, you are likely in, colleagues, you're in communities with other high income earners, and you can network that. That is actually something that's valuable to a GP team, because if they want to raise capital, they want to raise it from folks who have disposable income, who are interested in growing their wealth. You can you can leverage your time. And it's not time in the same way that we've talked about some of the other responsibilities. It's time that you can allocate outside of your working day. say you're a busy doctor and you're working 9 to 5 or 8 to 6, you can still put in some hours before or after or on the weekend, leverage some time to develop the investor relations, communicate, educate, and get folks in your circle to the point where they're confident and comfortable investing. And that takes knowledge, right? So you can leverage your knowledge. The more of these deals that you do, the more that you can, and the easier you can explain it to somebody who's newer, who has questions, who wants to invest but needs just some help understanding. And you definitely need to leverage skills. So if you're a good communicator in general, you can articulate, you can put thoughts together, you can put concepts together. This is what we do as physicians when we're seeing patients. We can put the big picture together and explain it to someone else who may not understand it to the level that we understand it. So if you're good at that, you're good at, you can leverage that skill. If you can do it in a public setting on a webinar or in front of a big crowd, it's even better. And then the last thing is capital. That's essentially the goal of the capital raiser, is to bring capital together, and that's what you're leveraging. So I want to kind of highlight those two. And another one I want to add is the underwriting. So we have loan guarantor, we have capital raiser, investor relations. And someone today in my investor mentoring club actually mentioned that they could possibly see themselves doing a little underwriting. They could possibly see themselves even doing a little underwriting and contributing that to a GP team, because it's something that doesn't require a high amount of capital or network. You can do that by yourself on off hours. So I'd like to hear from folks here. I think loan guarantor, capital raiser, and now even underwriting is something that a busy professional, a physician, a healthcare provider can do and find themselves on a GP team, which is a fairly desirable thing as far as how you can impact other people and also how you can improve your wealth building strategy. So I'm curious to hear from folks. We're at the 30-minute mark or so. I want to open it up for questions. We can include questions not only in the chat, but you can come off mute and come on camera and ask any questions that from the topic and the concepts we talked about.
How does one learn underwriting?
Very good question. I know of several sources that teach it. They may not be like an official school or degree, like I said in the very beginning, but Shannon Robnett, who's one of my partners on a 13-unit deal, he does an underwriting course, teaching course. Julius Oni with Excite Capital, I'm invested with them as an LP on a deal. They also have an underwriting course. And there are several other underwriting courses that you can take. You can also look on YouTube and see what's available on there. There's James Ang with Old Capital based out of Dallas, and he does a series of underwriting courses that I think he offers that for free. So that's a couple of ways to do underwriting or to learn underwriting. Another way I would add to that is you can find a mentor, and you can tag along with them for many things, not just underwriting, but they are someone that can also teach you underwriting. Good question. Anyone else with any questions?
Hey, George.
Yep.
Hey, how much do you think sales and persuasive skills play a role as far as from the capital raising standpoint, and how much do you put on that as far as being able to go to courses or mentorships to kind of learn how to leverage those skills?
I think it's crucial. I think it really is what makes someone decide to trust you or your team enough to wire funds over. I think you have to be able to educate. That's probably the most important part of that sales process, is taking the time to educate them, because it's just a vague bucket, when you think of investing and passive investing. And so you need time in order to educate. And I think how you educate, how you speak, how you identify their problems, and how you bring them to an understanding of what they will need to do to solve those problems is a skill. I think the way you set that up, the way you lay the table, set the table, and have that impact, that create that aha moment in their mind and motivate them is a skill to do that. And there are courses for that too. There are books that talk about the whole sales, what is it called? Psychology and the theory. It's what I used to think kind of dirty word, but it actually really isn't. It is involved in every part of life, even in medicine. I realized that as well. So there are great courses that are out there for it. There are great books that are out there. You can learn it again off of YouTube as well. I wouldn't say learn it only from YouTube, but verify with some other sources. I take a sales course every year based out of my mentoring club. They base that course off of another sales course. There's many courses out there. I think your other question was more towards how much would that cost? Is that correct?
If you have knowledge in terms of estimates of how much it may cost, that would be helpful too.
So I can only speak to how much the course that I take costs. I know they charge around $1,000 to $2,000 for a 2-day course. The way I am situated in the mentoring club, it kind of gets bundled into a whole year of other meetings, so it comes out cheaper than that. But that's what I think is a great course. I really enjoy it. I don't really have references to kind of compare it to, so I don't know if that's overvalued or undervalued. But if anything, that's a starting point. You can kind of base it off of that. They're a very reputable group, and it's a 2-day course that is packed with a lot of good information. Any other questions?
You touched on it before. Can you talk about the benefits of being a GP versus an LP?
Yes. So benefits for being a GP is that you can build wealth faster. There's very minimal downsides to being an LP. An LP is the only downsides that I really can see is that you don't have the direct control, which can be it can go either way. That can be a good or a bad thing. Like if you don't have the knowledge to take down a 300 unit apartment building, then I actually don't want to be in control. I want to be an LP. I actually want to leverage the knowledge of the GP because they have the skills and the knowledge, right? The other downside to being an LP is it's slower. So you just don't make those huge builds, jumps in wealth just off of 1 or 2 deals. It takes a little bit longer. You're going to have to invest in 15, 20, 30, 50 deals over your lifetime in order to really build that huge wealth. But it's doable. It just takes a lot longer. So on the GP side, the multiples that you get from the GP equity are much higher. So here's an example. A LP invests $100K in a passive investment deal. In 5 years, they double their money. So 2x in 5 years. Whereas a GP who also invests $100K or has that same amount of equity shares as the LP can get 9x, 10x, 12x. So it's 2x versus 10x, right? And so from the same deal. So the equity multiple is just a lot more on the GP side that you can get. It's just a faster route, a faster way to build wealth. And it's compensated, right? It's because there's extra work being done. So for that additional speed of building wealth, you're trading something. You've leveraged your time, your network, your capital. You put money at risk. You put more money at risk. Usually a lot of GPs invest the highest amount in their deals with skin in the game. And so you get compensated for that. You put the opportunity together. Whereas being an LP, You just have to do a little bit of work up front. You vet the GP team, you vet the market, you vet the deal. If you feel good about that, then after that, it's just passive. And that's not a bad way to go either. I was headed down that route too. And I was looking forward to it. And you can do a combination of both, right? You can be a little bit GP on some deals, you can be LP on some deals, right? And every deal you're a GP on, you ideally want to be an LP as well, because that shows you have skin in the game. So you never really stop being an LP. It's just some deals you can solely be an LP and just take a break and let somebody else that you trust do the work for you.
Got it. Thank you, George. That was helpful.
Yep. Anyone else?
Yeah, hey George. Quick, what have you found to be the most difficult thing about transitioning from your experience of initially starting with LP, but then transitioning to converting the mindset of transitioning to a GP, and the process itself in terms of, what do you need to put in place to be able to get to that point? How do you, look at different operators to say, okay, well, this is the operator I'm going to stick with, because I think if I'm representing, because from the extension of the GP team, especially from the capital raising standpoint or investor relation or any other component of the GP team, if you are working with an operator, how do you look at it to say, okay, this is one operator I'm going to, represent as I'm raising capital or working with as part of the GP team? And do you work with multiple operators in order to accomplish your goal as well?
Great questions. All questions that I also asked myself as I started considering being a capital raiser, investor relations. I would say the hardest thing is having that track record for someone on a GP team to trust you, right? It's like you're known as a doctor, you've done LP deals. What can you bring to the table as a GP? So trying to, and I'll kind of add some color to this. I actually tried to just do everything, like myself and 2 or 3 other doctors. We tried to fill in all those responsibilities and go be lead operators. We tried to reach out to lenders and brokers and find deals, and no one knew who we were. And so this was the hardest thing. It was like, when you're new, it's that initial momentum that you need to kind of get started is just so great that it's hard to overcome. So that was the biggest challenge. And I realized the best thing to do is to partner with, network into and partner with other lead operators and join them as capital raiser or KP. It's been offered quite a few times. You've been offered to be a loan guarantor, capital raiser, because you have that network. These are things that you come to the table with inherently, automatically, because you're a physician. You're going to have a network. You have a network of other physicians that you know. You have other healthcare providers that you know. You have capital because you're a high earner, And so this is one way that I kind of got over that hurdle. That was probably the biggest challenge that I faced. In my dealings as an LP, I purposely invested with different operators, and I didn't know if I realized it at the time, but I came to realize that, look, now I can kind of assess how each of these operators functioned, how I like them, how I don't like them, what I would, continue with, who I would continue with. And that's kind of a good way to start to decide like who you want to tag along with closer, right? Because you can be a capital raiser and work with multiple different people throughout your entire career, or you can be a capital raiser and work with 2 or 3 people that you just keep doing deals with. It can go either way. There are some capital groups out there that literally will fund several different deals, and they bring so much capital to the table that they can control a lot of the terms of the deals and get really good returns on it, even as an LP equity. But it's all kind of personal philosophy. Like you may want to just work with a small group of people that like, and trust, and that you feel confident with, that you're going to get good deals and good opportunities and fair treatment from, So it can go either way on that. My personal way is I want to pare it down and cone down to just 2 or 3 operators that I work with over, the course of the career. And that way I know who I'm working with each time. I don't know if I answered all of the questions. Was that everything?
Yep, you got it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Let me see if I had anything else I wanted to mention. A couple of other things I just wanted to mention. On the loan guarantor side, there are some professional loan guarantor key principles. They've been doing it 20, 25 years. I'm happy to share some of the links of websites and podcasts that I've seen some of these folks appear on as guests. And in kind of listening to them, I kind of learned some things. Sometimes you can actually command a loan guarantor fee that gets paid up front. Again, they're not just collecting the fee, they're also participating in the actual process of being on the GP team. So you can get acquisition fees just from being a loan guarantor. You can get percentages of the acquisition fee. So these are other ways that, income is made as a GP. Capital raisers, I mentioned that they're not only educators, but they are communicators with investor relations. You're also community builders. You're organizing events to bring people together. This is probably the most efficient way to develop an investor base. And you have to be flexible as far as like kind of doing other tasks. If there's something that may need to be done on the asset management side and the lead operator needs you to help out with something, that's a great thing to show that you're just not just on the capital raising side. You're doing some asset management, or you're looking at the underwriting, you're helping them with that, or you're helping walk the property if you have time. Again, this is it's not cut and dry, but being flexible as a capital raiser is also a pretty important thing, I would say. And then on the limited partner side, you can kind of just forget all the GP stuff and just focus on building your limited partner LP portfolio. You want to consider the tax and the entity asset protection strategy. So in addition to all the vetting that you have to do up front, you also want to talk with people to set up good tax structure so you can shield most of the taxes, maybe even get a little off your W-2 or your 1099. And then you also want to protect the assets. You want to have limited liability, which is a good part of reason for being a limited partner. But you want to make sure you have the right structures and entities in place so you can protect your investing LP assets from your W-2, your earned income assets, your personal assets. You want all that kind of tucked in and protected well. So those were the last points I had. Anyone else? It is.
I had a question. Can you tell me the name of the person on YouTube you said that will teach you underwriting?
Yes, I'll type a couple of names here. So Shannon Robnett, he does an underwriting course, and this helps because they give you their spreadsheets too, so you can look at their formulas, and so you don't have to start from just a blank Excel sheet. We said Julius Oni, and he's also an orthopedic surgeon, so another doctor doing big things with Excite Capital. Michael Blank actually offers an entire underwriting form specifically for multifamily syndication. So it's not applicable to other types of deals, but multifamily is probably the most common one. So Michael Blank, and I mentioned James Ang does the YouTube series, and he's with Old Capital.
I would say I've experience with doing I did Michael Blanks and I do Julius Sony's for underwriting, and I would say the Manny is the person doing the underwriting with Excite Capital with Julius Sony's group, and that underwriting is on point. It's basically an extension of Michael Blank's, but at a level beyond Michael Blank's.
Nice.
So they're very, very good. It's very heavy, but when you finish doing it, it's really good.
I think that time
Who is that
leverage-
again?
What was that
I'm
again,
sorry.
Pani?
No, I was saying that with Excite Capital, the underwriting that they do, it uses Michael Blank's deal analyzer, which is the software or the spreadsheet, programmed spreadsheet. That before doing that, my wife and I, we purchased the Michael Blank's underwriting program, and we did that, and then we did the Excite one. That the Excite one is an extension of that, but it's on a much higher level detail that really explains underwriting, especially if you're going to underwrite like 100 units, 200 units, much higher level units, and really streamlines it. But it is heavy on Excel and formulas. But once you understand it, it's on another level of underwriting. So it's very good.
Yeah, and that kind of
Thank
goes
you.
back to kind of what I was saying, that time leverage, that time component. For underwriting, it's on the front end, right? You know, it's a lot of upfront time investment to get familiar with software and all of that. But as you go on and as you get more comfortable with it and familiar with it, then that time component should get better, right? You know, but you still gotta underwrite deals and sit down and underwrite, 100 deals. So, but yeah, it's doable. Okay. We got about 8 minutes left. If anyone has any other questions, I'm also going to put in and remind everybody about our next webinar. We'll have another doctor, physician investor, who's made the jump to being a principal. So he is fully on the GP side. He's an asset manager. He's a principal. And so Tom Burns, he's an orthopedic surgeon out in Austin. He'll be talking to us in 2 weeks and talking about his experience going from an ortho surgeon, busy, successful practice, to a private real estate investment fund principal. So I think that's going to be a really, really good talk and a good follow-up to this talk.
Thank you, George.
Yeah, no problem. Well, we're going to wrap up. I hope everyone has a great rest of their weekend. Let me know if questions, please give us feedback. Please send referrals if you think this is valuable to other physicians, other busy professionals. We're happy to spread our knowledge and get more folks into these spaces. So with that, I'll say goodbye to everybody. Have a great rest of your night.
Excellent job.